Good evening, everyone. My name is Ashli Sowels, and I am a licensed professional counselor. Welcome back to our monthly webinars. Tonight's webinar will be geared towards the students, and I will have another webinar next week for the parents. So, as you saw on the flyer, tonight's title was Talk That Talk. Okay, Talk That Talk. And tonight I want to take a little bit of your time to discuss mindful communication. Okay, mindful communication. So, communication is very essential in our everyday lives. It's something that we do on a day to day basis, whether that be verbally communicating or non verbally communicating. We are constantly communicating with family, with friends, with teachers, peers, through different platforms like text or face to face or social media. We are constantly communicating in our everyday, just kind of day to day routine. We are constantly communicating. I'm sure some of you have experienced saying something um, in the heat of the moment that perhaps you regretted a little later. So today I want to introduce this topic to you guys. And like I said, it's called mindful communication. So it kind of brings everything that I've been talking about in the previous webinars, it kind of brings all of those things together in regarding to communicating to someone. Um, so, have you ever gotten into trouble because of your mouth? Have you ever gotten in trouble because of your mouth? How many of you are guilty of maybe smacking your teeth, whispering under your breath, or getting into a screaming match with your parents or teachers because you feel perhaps misunderstood? So today I'll be discussing mindful communication. So these will be some very helpful techniques you can use to get your point across without perhaps getting your phone or Xbox taken away or any other thing that you think is valuable to you. So let's kind of hop right in. So what is mindful communication? Well, communication in it by itself, kind of simply put, is giving and or receiving information. When we put that word mindful in front of communication, we're now making it a bit more involved. Okay? So, um like I said, I've been discussing mindfulness in the past webinars. So, you'll be hearing those kind of same words in this webinar in regard to communication. So when we think about mindful communication, that's going to require intention. It's going to require being present, as in actively listening. It's going to require being non judgmental, and then it's going to require being compassionate toward yourself and whomever it is that you are communicating with. Okay. So the first thing we want to talk about here is, excuse me, I also left out, we will also be discussing in regard to mindful communication, awareness. Okay. With awareness of emotion as well as awareness of your thoughts. All right. So the first thing I want to kind of dive into is awareness of emotion. As I've mentioned before, our feelings can impact our behavior, which means if I'm angry or irritated or anxious or annoyed or embarrassed or sad, I could go off and say something that I might regret or even get punished for. Okay. So before you type out a text, before you make a comment on Instagram or Facebook or TikTok, before you actually open your mouth to verbally communicate to someone, the first thing you want to be aware of is your emotions, your emotions, excuse me. You want to know, how am I feeling in this moment? Okay. Um, so you want to kind of the first thing you want to assess is, what am I feeling? So naming those emotions, like I talked about in the emotions webinar, right? We want to name those emotions. So I'm feeling anxious, I'm feeling angry, sad, frustrated, embarrassed, lonely, disconnected, whatever it is. Using that feelings chart that I talked about, or the feelings wheel that I talked about, you can use that if you don't quite know in the moment what you're feeling. Okay, so you want to be aware of what it is you're feeling. So that's the first step, naming the emotion. The next thing you want to assess, once you've kind of named what it is that you're feeling, you want to kind of gauge how intense that emotion is, right? And it's easy to kind of use a scale of 1 to 10. Is my anger at a level 5 right now? Is it a level 3? Is it a level 10? Right? 1 being the least intense and 10 being the most intense. Okay, so you want to assess the level at which you're feeling that emotion, because we know that that can absolutely influence the things that are coming out of our mouths. Okay, so now don't get me wrong, this does not mean you have to be void of emotion to get your point across. Okay? You do not have to be void of emotion. You just want to be aware. You want to be aware of what it is that you're feeling and at what level you're feeling it. Okay? That's the most important thing when we are being aware of emotion, right? Um, so, for example, if you know the higher your anger or frustration level, the more likely you are to pop off, right? Then that is a sign to say, okay, my level of anger, my level of frustration, it's at a really high level right now, and I could potentially say something that I might regret or even get in trouble for. So let me, use some of those coping skills that I've talked about in the previous webinars, using some of those breathing skills, right? Like I always say, breathing is the best go-to. Okay, so if you know your level of anxiety or your level of anger or frustration or whatever it is, if it's really high, then we need to bring it down a few notches before we start to engage in any kind of communication. All right? So that is awareness of emotion. So I want to kind of talk about some of the barriers that you may come across when you are communicating. Okay, and these barriers are going to lead into being aware of your thoughts. All right, so some barriers to mindfully communicating, and really on the listening end, right? So you have comparison, you have mind reading, and you have judging. Those are the three barriers that can really keep us from being mindful of what it is that we are intending to communicate. All right, remember that word, intention. And I'll get into intention a little bit later. Okay, so comparison, right? I'm comparing the outcomes maybe of friends and or peers experiences to my own. And this tends to happen, all of these barriers, the comparison, the mind reading, the judging, all of these things tend to happen before you really even open your mouth. Okay. So, like I said, comparison. You are comparing the outcomes of what kind of happened when your friend or your peer said this to their parent or their teacher or their family member, and you're kind of comparing their experience to what you think your experience could be. And the danger in that is that was their experience. Simply put, right? That was their experience. There is no way to compare something that already happened with something that hasn't happened. You That's not a thing that we can do, right? So you don't want to go into communicating with someone with these comparisons kind of in your mind, because those are, of course, influencing how you feel in that moment. Okay. And let me kind of back up a little bit. We have to remember that mindfulness is experiencing the present moment. So when we have past experiences in our minds and we're kind of doing this compare and contrast, then that's a sign, right, that I'm really not in the moment. I'm really not experiencing reality right now, right? So you really want to be aware of that. So the next one, mind reading. So, mind reading is thinking you know what the speaker, which is the person that you're communicating with, right? Thinking you know what the speaker is going to say and or do before you even have the conversation. Mind reading can absolutely influence how you feel, okay? So, then we have judging. Judging, again, the speaker based on past experiences. And in just a second, I'm going to get into some more examples so you can have a clear picture of what I'm saying here. Okay, so the barriers are comparison, mind reading, and judging. Okay, so keep those three things in mind as I move forward and talk about awareness of thoughts. Okay, keep those three barriers in mind. So, just like our emotions, our thoughts can also have an impact on our behavior. In this case, what we say. Okay, communicating is a behavior. Okay, so anytime I say behavior in regard to this, I'm talking about communicating with whomever. All right. So, like I said earlier, comparison, mind reading, and judging, all of these things happen in our mind. So, you can think of these things as thoughts because that's essentially what they are. A judgment is a thought, mind reading is thinking, right? And making comparisons. I mean, you can make verbal comparisons, but um in what I'm talking about here, we're doing all the comparisons like in our heads. So you can think of all of these things as thoughts. All right. So think about, okay, really think about the last time you asked your mom or your dad for something that you really wanted. What were you thinking? Right? Did did you already think about what they might say? Are you comparing experiences, whether it be your own experiences that you've had or from when a friend asked their parent for the same thing? Are you kind of using their experience and comparing that? Um, are you judging your mom or dad in your mind, right? So what's going through your mind before you actually have the conversation and while you're having the conversation, okay? Um, you know, so are you thinking about my parents never listen to me. They never listen to me. They never give me what I ask for, right? They're just mean. They're so strict and they never do what I want them to do. Right? Are these kinds of things going through your mind when you're asking your parents for something? Um the important thing to note here is you never truly know what someone is going to say until they actually say it. Right? So we can mind read all day, we can judge all day, we can compare all day long. But we are not going to know until we know, until that person has given us a response. Okay? So, but and then the other important thing to note in this scenario is to remember, if I'm doing all this judging, all of this comparing, all of this mind reading, I'm already influencing my emotion. So I'm really already kind of riling myself up, especially if I'm thinking of a negative outcome or past negative experiences. And remember, when we are being mindful, we are present. We are in the moment. So anything from the past, we've kind of we're disregarding, right? We're letting those thoughts kind of pass on by, or like or we're kind of popping those thought bubbles because they're not helpful, right? That's what you want to do in a situation like that. If past experiences and judgments and comparisons and things like that start to enter your mind, let those thoughts pass, right? We don't want to attach ourselves to those kinds of thoughts because they will influence how we feel, right? If I go into my mom's room and ask her, well, I already have in my mind what I want to ask her, and I'm thinking to myself, she's just going to say no, right? Maybe I'm already angry, maybe I'm already frustrated, right? So you really want to go into conversation with a clean slate, if you will, right? With this kind of balanced state of mind. You want to go into this experience as if you've never experienced it before, because technically you haven't, right? You have had past experiences of maybe your parents telling you no after you've asked for something, but that's not this experience. We don't know what's going to happen until the conversation transpires and we get a response. Okay? So we really don't know. And that in itself might be a little anxiety provoking, and that's totally okay. Right? That is totally okay. And that's when we go back to doing our breathing exercises, dealing with those emotions as they come up. Okay? So that is awareness of thought. Okay? So let's see. The next thing we're going to move into here is intention. All right? I've mentioned that a little bit earlier. Intention. So once you have your emotions under control and you have your thoughts, you're allowing those thoughts to kind of pass, especially if those thoughts aren't helping you in the moment, letting them pass on by. Once you're in a very comfortable place to have, an effective conversation. The next thing you want to do is know what your intention is. What is my plan here? What exactly am I trying to communicate? Am I trying to communicate how I feel? Am I trying to express myself? Am I giving an opinion? Am I planning to ask for something? What is it? What am I trying to do? What am I trying to communicate? So before you even open your mouth, you want to make sure that you have very clear intentions or have a plan about what it is that you're trying to communicate. Okay, so that's intention. Very simple, right? Just having a plan. All right. The next thing is being present or actively listening. Okay. Let me tell you what I'm gonna kind of portray to you what active listening is not. Okay. This is not active listening. Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. That is not active listening, right? As you saw, I had the remote in my hand, I had my phone in my hand, right? That's not active listening. I'm not giving this person my full attention. Okay, so that's not active listening. Putting your hoodie on or covering yourself up with a blanket if you're in the bed or if you're laying down on the couch, that is not, sorry to tell you, that's not active listening. So, active listening Okay. You are you have eye contact, right? You have eye contact with the person that you are speaking to or the person that is speaking to you. So you have eye contact. You have very open body language, and I know you can't see my whole body right now, but you have very open body language. So my arms aren't crossed, my face isn't like whatever, but I'm not saying it, but my face is, right? So my arms aren't crossed, my face isn't like scrunched, or like I'm not rolling my eyes for sure, right? Because I'm still engaged in eye contact, in direct eye contact, right? So active listening requires that eye contact is open body language, um a, a non-tense kind of face. And I'm not saying that you have to sit there and like look stoic or like a robot and have absolutely no expression. I'm not saying that at all, but you definitely want to be aware, right? If I am, talking to my boss, I'm definitely not going to be rolling my eyes at everything that my boss says. Okay. If you are listening to something that your parents are telling you, if you are, again, doing this on your phone, you're not engaged. And that in itself is communicating that I'm not really fully here, right? In maybe the first webinar I did, I talked about um, not being able to, if we are being mindful, we can't give more than one thing our full attention. So I can't scroll on my phone and listen to someone fully at the same time. Our brains don't work like that. So there is no such thing as multitasking. And that includes listening and being on the phone, or listening and being on the computer, listening and watching TV, right? So if we're going to actively participate in a conversation and actively listen, we have to be aware of our body language. That's extremely important. And then the other thing that you want to do when you are actively listening is say more than uh-huh. And I know sometimes it doesn't necessarily require you to, say too much. But you do want to let the person know that I'm listening. So you could nod your head and say, I understand, right? I understand what you're saying. Oh, okay, cool, right? So you want to engage yourself in the conversation by actively listening, okay? Um, Another thing that actively listening is not smacking your teeth. Again, it's not rolling your eyes. It's not doing this like mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. It's not that, right? It's not any of those things. So again, direct eye contact, open body language, nodding your head or shaking your head and saying, "Oh, okay, cool, I understand," or "Oh, could you repeat that? I don't understand what you're saying." Right? Being fully engaged and actively listening to the person that you are having a conversation with. And then at the end of the day, it also shows a sign of respect, right? And you don't have to you don't have to agree with someone to actively listen to someone. That's probably the key thing. If you don't remember anything else I said so far tonight, I want you to remember that if you don't agree with the person, that does not mean you can't actively listen to that person. Okay. So whether you agree or disagree, you can actively listen, and it shows a sign. It just shows respect. Okay. So the next thing, or the last thing in regard to mindful conversation is compassion. Okay. Um. So I'm gonna talk about compassion in two ways. So compassion toward yourself and compassion toward others. And I know it's not really all that common for people to be compassionate toward themselves, show themselves kindness when they are communicating with someone. So I want to give you a couple of examples. Um, Compassion for yourself looks like positive self talk instead of negative self talk. You won't believe how many just people in general, whether it be kids all the way up to adults, right, who say things like, I know I'm stupid for asking this question, or I know this is a dumb thing to ask, or I might sound dumb saying something like this, right? That's negative self talk. And it's very important that you be aware of that. And that kind of self talk is not compassionate or kind in any kind of way. Okay. So, anytime you are communicating with anybody, you definitely want to be aware of your own personal self talk. Like, how do I talk about myself to other people? That is something that you definitely want to keep in mind. Okay. And then when we talk about compassion, we also want to include, of course, being or extending compassion and kindness and grace to the person that we are communicating with. And again, if I agree or disagree, and I don't mean to say this like flippantly, like it's some easy thing to do, because sometimes I know it's not easy to show grace and kindness and compassion to people that you just flat out disagree with. Right? I get it. It sometimes it is extremely challenging. Um but the more aware you are of just extending grace and compassion, well sometimes will and it'll sometimes help you just keep your mouth shut, not say anything at all. Sometimes extending grace and compassion can look like being silent. And what I mean by that is maybe it goes back to that very old saying that maybe grandma, grandpa, mom, or dad taught you a long time ago. If you don't have anything nice to say, maybe we don't say anything at all. All right. That is a way to extend grace and kindness and compassion. How about I just keep my mouth shut? And how about I don't say anything at all? Right? How about I don't say anything that could potentially hurt this person? Right? How about I just keep my mouth closed? That is absolutely a way of showing compassion and kindness and grace. Okay. So, remembering I can be compassionate toward myself by being aware of my self talk, about how I talk about myself to other people. And then I can show compassion toward the person that I'm communicating with. And that can look like me being silent and keeping my mouth closed in that moment. Okay. So, I want to talk about a very particular technique that some of you may have heard of and some of you haven't, but I'm going to go over it because I think it's extremely important when we are trying to communicate in a mindful way. So, I want to talk about um, I statements and you statements. Okay, so first I'll talk to you about what an I statement is. An I statement is a technique that you can use to effectively communicate, whether it be with friends, families, peers, teachers, whomever, right? You can use it with whomever it is that you're talking to. An I statement allows you to take responsibility and ownership of your own thoughts and your own behavior and your own emotion. Okay. And it keeps you away from this victim mentality. Like, you did this to me. Okay. It keeps you away from that. Okay. So, by assuming responsibility, you stay away from blaming others and placing responsibility on others, right? And this kind of communication, it's it's effective, like I said, with whomever you're talking to in whatever kind of situation it is. But I find that I statements are extremely useful when you're experiencing some kind of conflict with someone. Okay. And later on, I'll give you some examples of how to use an I statement. Um, so those are I statements, right? I am taking responsibility for how I feel, what I'm thinking, and essentially what I'm doing. I take responsibility for that stuff. Okay. And I'm not placing blame on anyone else. So you statements are essentially the complete opposite. You statements place blame and show no ownership of one's emotions and thoughts and behavior. Okay. So I'm not taking any ownership. I'm not taking any responsibility. That's what a you statement looks like. All right. So let me go into some examples of an I statement. So there is a formula for, and I don't scoff when I say formula. I promise I'm not going to bore you. Um, I know y'all get enough of formulas in class and things like that, but this is a really good formula that you can use. It's super easy. Okay, so I want you guys to kind of write this down or put it in the notes in your phone. Okay, so an I statement: I feel blank when blank because blank in the future blank. Okay, so I feel when because I would like in the future. Okay, those are the four things, super easy, the four things that go into an I statement. This can seem extremely strange and weird, especially if it's your first time kind of communicating this way. So it's going to seem awkward the first few times you use I statements, but I encourage you to use I statements as much as you possibly can, especially in times of conflict. So I'm going to first give you a list of some I statement starters, and then I will give you an example of a full I statement. Okay, so here are some I statement starters. I feel powerless when I don't know what to do. So that's I feel and when. These are I statement starters. I feel powerless, right? That emotion when I don't know what to do. It's just an example. Another example. Excuse me. I feel anxious when I have upcoming exams. I feel anxious when I have upcoming exams. Another one. I feel unheard when you don't consider my feelings. I feel unheard when you don't consider my feelings. I feel pressure when I do school virtually. I feel pressure when I do school virtually. And then the last one, I feel peaceful when I am rested. I feel peaceful when I am rested. So a full I statement would sound something like this. I feel unheard when you don't consider my feelings because it seems like you don't care. In the future, when I'm expressing my feelings, could you acknowledge my feelings even if you don't agree? That is a full I statement. And again, I know, it might seem weird and awkward, and you might even feel silly, talking in this way. but I can tell you it's way more effective. Way more effective. This is what an I statement is not. Okay. And I'm gonna say the full I statement one more time, and then I'll give you an example of what it's not. Okay, so a full I statement one more time. I feel unheard when you don't consider my feelings because it seems like you don't care. In the future, when I'm expressing my feelings, could you acknowledge my feelings even if you don't agree? Okay, that's an example of a full I statement. And I know as students, some of you are kind of thinking, like, is that something that I can say to my mom? Or is that something I can say to my dad? Or is that something I can say to my teacher? Yes. Yes, it is. And hopefully, and also when you give a full I statement, the person on the receiving end, they are gonna less likely be in defense mode. Okay? Because if you come at somebody, like you can come at somebody, the person on the receiving end of that might be more likely to be in defense mode, right? Like they have to defend themselves from what you're saying to them. So when you use a full I statement expressing how you feel, why you feel that way, okay, the person on the receiving end is less likely to be defensive and more likely to listen and really hear what it is that you are saying. Okay. So this is what an I statement is not. Saying something like this will definitely put the receiving person on or in defense mode. Okay. So an I statement is not um you know an I statement is not, you never listen to me. You never listen to me. That's that's not that's not an I statement. And when you tell somebody what they never do, right? That's an automatic, they're automatically going into defense mode. Okay? You never, or you should, or you always, or you fill in the blank with a judgment, right? That will automatically put somebody on the defense, and that is not an I statement. And then the other thing, I automatically know when somebody is about to tell me what they think or what they feel by one word. One little word. I'm going to give you guys a couple of seconds. See if you can guess what word I'm thinking about. I can tell when somebody is about to tell me what they think instead of what they feel. Do you know what word people most commonly use? I'll give you a couple seconds. So, the word is like. Okay, the word is like. When someone says, I feel like, I automatically know that they are about to give me or tell me what they are thinking instead of what they are feeling. Okay? What they're thinking instead of what they're feeling. And kind of just do this own little experiment on yourself. How many times do you say I feel like and follow it up with a thought instead of an emotion? Okay? And I mean, I get it. We've been kind of conditioned to say I feel like and follow that up with a thought. Right? We've been kind of conditioned to do that. Some people do it because they don't feel vulnerable enough to express their emotion. Some people say that because they don't know how they feel. And so I'm not saying that it's a good thing, bad thing, right or wrong. I just want to bring that into your awareness so that when you use I statements, you want to make sure that you are leading with the emotion. I feel blank. Not I feel like you get on my last nerve. That's not a feeling, right? Or I feel like you could do better. not a feeling. That's a thought, right? So whenever you're using your I statements, you want to make sure if you're saying I feel and you feel comfortable enough to express, what you're feeling with the person that you're communicating with, um you say I feel and follow that up with an emotion, a feeling word. Again, you can use the feeling chart, the feeling wheel that I talked about in the last webinar. Okay, so I feel like is also not an I statement. All right. So and before I move on, I just want to say if you don't feel comfortable enough, expressing yourself to whomever you're expressing yourself to, you can set that boundary and you can say, I don't feel vulnerable enough to express how I feel in this moment. That's not to say you'll never feel comfortable enough to do so. It's just in that moment, I don't really feel comfortable enough expressing myself to you right now. And that is a totally acceptable thing to say. Okay? I don't really feel comfortable expressing myself right now. Can I once I figure it out, can I do it? Can I do it later? Okay? And if you don't, trust that person at all, find somebody that you do trust. Because remember, it is important to kind of get that stuff out. We don't want those feelings to build and build and build and build, and then we pop off, right? That's what we don't want to happen. Okay. So here are just some other examples of you statements. You just don't understand. You never listen. You made me feel. So it's basically you fill in the blank with a should, never, always, or a judgment, right? Those are examples of you statements, right? You made me feel. You never listen. You just don't understand. Those are examples of you statements. And again, we want to try our best to shy away from that kind of communication. Okay? Because it puts the receiver in defense mode. So now what I wanted to be effective communication has turned into something totally different, and most likely turns into a conflict. As soon as you tell somebody what you think they're doing, or what you think they're not doing, that person is automatically just naturally gonna go into defense mode because this this kind of language is it's like attack language, right? You're attacking this person. And that's not what we want to do if we are trying to be effective. Okay? So, how do I turn the you into I? Okay? So, I'm going to give you a few examples of how to do that. So, you don't really like me or care about me. You don't take time for me. If you did, you'd pay more attention to me. That is a you statement. I am attacking this person with my words, right? That's not what I want to do if I want to be effective. So an I statement, and I'm not using a full I statement here. I'm just using I statement starters. Okay, so instead we could say something to the effect of, I feel a disconnect when we don't communicate. Short, sweet, and to the point, right? I feel a disconnect when we don't communicate. This way, when we use I statements, it takes us into the land of problem solving instead of conflict and attacking, right? That's why I said these are most effective in any kind of conflict that you're having with somebody. So another one, you never listen to me. You never listen to me. You don't understand me. Okay? We are attacking, right? We don't want to attack if we are trying to be effective. So the I statement, or the I statement starter, excuse me. I feel frustrated when you don't listen to me. I feel frustrated when you don't listen to me. Very simple and to the point. Again, this opens up the space for problem solving instead of attacking and defending. Okay? The last one here. You never listen to me when I talk to you about my friends. You never listen to me when I talk to you about my friends. Again, we are in attack mode, right? So we want to come out of attack mode and into problem solve mode and expression mode, right? I feel unheard when you disagree with me without acknowledging what I'm saying. I feel unheard when you disagree with me without acknowledging what I'm saying. Okay? Very acceptable way to communicate if we want to get into that problem solving territory instead, again, of that attack and defend territory, right? Because as soon as you attack and that person goes into defense mode, then you in return will go into defense mode. And then it'll just be this never ending cycle of attack, defend, attack, defend, attack, defend, right? Attack, defend, attack, defend. And we don't want to do that if we are trying to be effective. Now, if you're not trying to be effective, if you're not trying to communicate effectively, then I guess you'll be okay with the attack, defend kind of cycle. But if you want to learn how to communicate effectively and mindfully, you can definitely use this I statement kind of technique. Okay. So, just in conclusion, we're almost done here. Mindful communication is extremely important. Okay, at the end of the day, it can open doors that you need open. It can close some windows that you need closed. Okay, it allows you to set boundaries. Mindful communication allows you to be assertive and be respectful all at the same time. It can perhaps get you that job or that internship that you've been wanting, or get you into the college or university that you want to get into, or get you on that team that you really want to play for. Mindful communication can do that for you. It can also, like I've been saying, resolve conflict and put you in that problem solve territory instead of the attack defend territory. And just most importantly, mindful communication can absolutely help you get a seat at the table. Or it can serve as a tool to help you build your own table and your own seat. Okay, mindful communication can do that for you. So that's all I have for you guys this evening. Thank you so much for tuning in. Again, I always want to thank Dr. Kanisha Waits and the Strengthening Families team for giving me this platform and this space to speak with you guys in these very trying times that we're in. If you have any questions, you can go to my website. If you need anyone to talk to, if you need some therapy, and you need to just get some of this out and you want to learn how to communicate, you can go to my website, www.momello.co. Okay, that's my website, www.momello.co. And I am accepting new clients, and my first 4 sessions are always free of charge. Again, I never want, money to be the reason you can't take care of your mental health. So I want everyone to be well, be safe, stay healthy, and thank you so much. And you guys have a wonderful night.